Welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. We're here to help you tap into your natural genius. Let's go. Auntie Barbara Randall is so full of wisdom and sensing. She can sense in a conversation what really needs to be talked to and the nuances and what the person that she's conversing with is wanting to get to. I love being in conversation with Auntie Barb because she's a very dear friend, and also because she often leaves me with both insights and has me thinking after our conversations. I was lucky enough to meet her and Uncle Bob over a decade ago, and then after Uncle Bob died, Auntie Barb and I reconnected in about 2020. I was headed north quite a distance to travel, and Google Maps suddenly disappeared the route that I was going. So it was sending me towards the coast, and of course Auntie Barb was on the coast. I messaged her beforehand and said, "Shall I pop in for a cuppa?" And I ended up by doing so and then leaving 10 days later. She is an amazing person to spend time with and has seen so many different wisdom cultures through the world and is incredible at being able to bring forth relevant knowledge from having spent a lot of time by Uncle Bob's side, and thankfully also brings knowledge from both her childhood and other situations she's been in life. Enjoy hearing from one of the stunning humans on this planet. My beautiful friend Auntie Barb, welcome to the Natural Genius podcast.
Thank you, Sam. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, Auntie, you make me so happy whenever I'm in conversation with you. With the intro that I do beforehand for these episodes, I was reflecting on stopping for a cup of tea when Google Maps completely removed my direction I was going in, and then you and I reconnected very easily over a cup of tea that lasted for 10 days.
Yes, that was a memorable time. You know, I almost feel like there are no accidents, and these things that bring us together, they can be quite a surprise. And then when you think about how they fit into life and the world, it's almost as if, how can you possibly question there's this incredible intelligence in the universe that is orchestrating all of these good things if we're open to it and receptive and we're willing to take the chance, and act on it. And it's such an exciting time. And even looking back in history, thinking about how you stopped in for a cup of tea because of your Google Maps thing. And then the next thing you know, we're working together for that incredible project over a 10-day period. It was just, what can I say? It was a great gift.
It was a great gift. And Auntie, I remember putting together the Kanyini, which we'll get into, the Kanyini philosophy into a curriculum for the kids. I remember your kindness in whenever I didn't understand something that we were putting into video form or into all different aspects of the curriculum, me mainly running it through Canva, which is a website that was just so helpful to cut video and to put images together. And I remember anytime I didn't understand a word or how it was pronounced or the background to what it meant, you would just stop everything and teach me. And it was such a gift for me. What an introduction to Uncle Bob's legacy and the philosophy.
Well, I think that it's a meaningful thing that you bring that up. And I'm glad to hear that that was your experience, that I was kind and that I proceeded in that way, because I really do believe that if I don't action the way of being of Kanyini, then I have no business holding a responsibility for sharing it. And really, sometimes we get so transactional in our life, because we have these pressures and we have these deadlines and we have these goals and we have these things that we want to create. And what meaning would it have if we trampled each other in the process? You know, the beauty is who we get to meet along the way and how we get to be together. That's the beauty of doing any of these things. And without that way of being, none of that would mean anything, because I'd actually, if I wasn't kind, if I was something else, whatever energy we shared in that space together, that was the energy that we added to that work. And how could it be anything but kindness, truth, love, caring, sharing, generosity, patience? And that's the way life is meant to be. I think that is actually what we're beginning to experience.
Auntie, tell me about Kanyini philosophy, because it's a nice context for others to hear about it.
Kanyini is a word that means to care for. It's my husband's mother tongue, Yankunytjatjara and Mutitjulu. And it means, in the context of the culture, in the language, it means to care for or to keep or to hold. And it means to hold, to keep. And it also carries a deeper meaning that doesn't really have an English translation into those words, because it is a word that's used, like all language words, in the context of the culture. So backing up that word is the whole cultural way of what it means to care for, to keep in the heart, to hold. And, you know, in some ways it's it just doesn't have a translation. But what happened was, over time, Bob, my husband, as a stolen generations person, as a someone who lived through a lot of the trauma years of being Aboriginal. In fact, his whole life was informed by, you could say, hardship, simply because of his race and the color of his skin. Over the years, as a teacher, he realized that this word and this way of being captured an entire gestalt that was not understood by the rest of humanity, necessarily. And so he began to teach around this particular word what it means to care for in the context of his culture. And what it does mean, in his words, is to care for to the level of having unconditional love with responsibility for yourself and from yourself. And that unconditional love has to go out to all creation. And within that, in the context of the culture, there are 4 areas of life to which this caring and this love, this unconditional love, is applied. Those 4 areas he referred to as the 4 Kanyini principles. And I'll just give you the cliff notes of that for time's sake. But the first principle would be Jukurpa, or the belief system about creation, the laws and the lore that taught all of the moral and the survival skills to live in a good way. And that particular area of life is fixed. It was given from the time of creation. And so all of those lores, stories in the land and the songlines and the laws that went with it were the foundation of Aboriginal way of being, of living. And so there was no guesswork in right and wrong. Everything was defined and taught through the arts, through the story, the song, the dance, and the art. And so that was Jukurpa, an area to which each human, every human, is responsible. Our belief system about creation and the energy of the superconsciousness of creation. You could say, what do we believe about the creative force. The second area is kurunpa, which is spirit and spirituality. And within that area, we have to apply care, attention, consciousness, because everything has spirit. We see the physical with our eyes, but if we develop the practices, actually we're born with them, but then sometimes they get diminished over time because we get distracted with other things, including lots of noise and lots of material objects and a lessening of our contact with nature. Sometimes we forget spirit in Western and European culture especially, and so it's very important to pay attention to the spirit of all things. That would be the unseen energy, which some people can see. The third thing is walcha. Walcha is family, and family means not only the biological family, but our family of creation. So everything for some people is family, and we get to decide, how extensive is family to me. How aware am I that I am a child of the earth and that these trees are my family and the animals are my family and the wind and the water and everything in creation is my family. And so I am responsible for caring for that family, for that unconditional love. That is my responsibility from myself to all things. And the last thing is the land, Ngora. Ngora is the place of belonging. And some of us see our Ngora as the place where we were born or the place where we purchase a home and we fence in our yard. But really, Ngora is the feeling of belonging that we have while being embodied in this earth and in this life. And so that is a very personal perception. I've always felt a child of the world. I've never felt a patriot to any one country because that didn't make any sense to me. Why would I be a patriot to one country and not another? Where this is all one beautiful planet. And then beyond the planet is the stars and the planets and then. And so, that's Ngora, belonging. And it's my responsibility to care for my Ngora with unconditional love.
I love that you... Sorry, go ahead.
So basically, the Kanyini principles are the foundation of what it means to action being a good human, the universal principles of that.
To be a good human, how divine. And Auntie, I was about to say before, I love that you ended on Nura because I think we spent a long time trying to get me to pronounce that properly. In amongst a lot of laughter.
I wouldn't be the example of good pronunciation because that's not my mother tongue. In a perfect world, you would have a language speaker to teach you, as would I.
And Auntie, that brings up a beautiful point. I feel like I often say to people when I'm talking about you that you are amazing at being able to carry forward examples of what you experienced with Uncle Bob to give nuance.
I can't remember what I ate for breakfast, but for some reason, there were so many moments, those moments that it's like your soul remembers. And the mind does want to know what the soul knows. And I think that when something in life really touches our soul, the soul is there, but the mind doesn't always remember. And when something really touches our soul, somehow it sticks. It sticks because it's as if it's woken up a part of us that has always been there, but it hasn't been allowed in because we've been human. We've been in our humanness. We've been in our thinking mind or our doing mind. And you know, the more we practice being in our being self, but actioning that being in service with Kanyini, I think the soul is just so excited. The soul just comes on board. And I think there were so many moments, so many experiences with Bob where I was there with my soul. My soul was there with me, and I was aware, because how could I miss it? It was too meaningful, and I think it was I had help. It was a destiny, and so I had spiritual help to help me recognize. I was like a little bit like a fly on the wall. I was present, but at the same time, I had come from the opposite side of the world, stepped into an immersion in a culture that I didn't know anything about. And Bob used to kind of, you know, he would give his own interviews and his own perceptions of things, but he would always want me to experience it for myself. He wouldn't necessarily want to lead me. He would want me to have the direct experience, which is so important for learning. And he used to say that a lot to people. Don't just take my word for it, try it out for yourself. And that really is the way we absorb things. So I was side by side with him, and much of what he experienced, our hearts were so linked. I felt his challenges, his pain, his suffering, his joy. I felt it all. And so these things, when you feel them in your heart, you do remember them.
Oh, Auntie, blow me away with your words. That is incredible. It's lovely that we're talking about Uncle Bob, because I wanted to hear what love means to you now from having been with Uncle Bob. And I also want to bring in that lovely story, or the way that you've told me that he used to sit you in a certain spot, or he used to sit himself in a certain spot as a way of protecting his mate. And I wanted to hear more about that lovely feeling of safety and of, yeah, that feeling of love. Perhaps also, Auntie, you might provide a little context with what is now Waterford Country School, where you grew up, because there's another aspect of you that I delight in, as many as my dear friend, around the fact that one time you said to me you can't see disability because you grew up amongst people that were unique and in all different shapes and sizes. So tell me about love. Tell me about perhaps growing up and the context and how that linked you into Uncle Bob.
I've always felt that love is a state of being. And love and partnership, when they meet in the same life, it's pretty special. It's like this gift of an opportunity. And so, you know, love is so many things. Love is so many things that probably most of the music industry and the film industry and the advertising industry, that everything is focused on this word love. But the word love is not the same as the state of love. And so as a state of being, it's a consciousness that I think is the highest consciousness that there is. we're starting to choose and to say, you know what, that's not love. This isn't love. That's not love. I'm not sure what love is, but I know that isn't. And so there was a time in my life when everything radically changed as an adult, when I was ready and I realized that there was something inside me that maybe couldn't define love, but I knew that the answer to what love was not outside me. And so I'm a little all over the place here, but that is what feels like what's up right now, the what is most important to speak to. So when I was about 1999, I think, I started a real shift in my life where I ventured into more spiritual pursuits. Now, I didn't do it on purpose. I did it because I herniated a disc in my neck and I could no longer run or swim or bike or even walk. And I had just moved to Cincinnati and I see a sign on the corner with an arrow that said yoga. And I just shook my head and thought, oh no, I know I have to do that. and so it was as if there was this knowing inside me that there it was. It was the only thing I could do. So
the knowing that came with an eye roll.
Yes, exactly. The knowing that came with an eye roll, because I wasn't used to being involved in groups. I was a stay-at-home mom, and at any rate, so I took a yoga class in a woman's barn in the neighborhood. One thing led to another, and the next thing you know, she's going out of town, and everybody points to me and says, "You need to lead the classes." And so I did. And then the next thing you know, somebody in the class says, "I'm going to go do yoga teacher training. You want to come?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And the next thing you know, I'm disillusioned. I'm disillusioned with the practice because there was something in me that knew that there was something more. And that something was now I'm on this pathway, whether I knew it or not, to love, to opening my heart, to deepening my consciousness, raising my frequency, whatever you want to call it. But I knew there was something more. And to me, most of my experiences felt commodified. It was this kind of cookie cutter practice thing. And yes, I had some, inner experiences, but it was disappointing. And so one day there was a flyer at the yoga class, and it was a free talk given by a visiting monk. And even though I never did things like this, I picked up that flyer, I looked at it, and I was like, I gotta go. Long story short, I'm sitting in this raised ranch in the basement of a raised ranch with peacock feathers and silk flowers and plastic flowers all over the place, all these bright colors in a very East Indian culture. And down the stairs walks a monk in his orange robes, and the whole room filled with light. And I was blown away. And I just had the deepest respect and even love, you could say, for this human who represented a purity of being that I had never met before in my life. And so I took initiation with him, and I started to practice that particular meditation technique, and my inner world took off. But not too long after that, I was to take another turn, and I think actually during that, it's a long story, and it's the stuff that Harry Potter is made of, but I ended up studying healing arts. So it started when one of my yoga students asked me to look after her 80-year-old mother, and when she went out of town. And I found myself at the emergency room of the Veterans Administration Hospital with her because her blood pressure was 220/128 at 8 o'clock at night. And someone had just dragged me to this little healing class where you put your hands on a person and you learn how to run energy out and you learn how to pull energy through. And so I couldn't stand it that they just hooked her up to a monitor and left her, this 80-year-old woman. And I said, Betty, aren't they going to do something? You know, and she said, no, this is what they do. They just leave me. And so I said, well, do you want me to try something? And she said, yes. And so I put my hands on her head. I didn't know what I was doing, but she had high blood pressure. And then something told me to go to her feet. And as soon as I did, I felt all these sparklers going through my hands and running through my body. And her blood pressure monitor immediately dropped. I'm talking within 60 seconds. And I knew Spirit hooked me up to this monitor because I was so resistant. And at any rate, immediately after that, that same person who dragged me to the class dragged me to Asheville, North Carolina, and I had extraordinary experiences in a long weekend with a teacher. And they were experiences I didn't typically have. Seeing Spirit standing in the same room, all kinds of things. So at any rate, there I'm rolling my eyes again saying, oh my gosh, first they hooked me up to a monitor. Now I'm getting these invitations to come to a 3-year course by this same teacher. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they want me to do this. And so I signed up for the 3-year course. And I'm still an eye roller because I didn't believe in myself. Other people were healers. Other people did these things. But I was so pushed and directed, and, you know, this is not a life that I had necessarily chosen, but it had chosen me. And I, for whatever reason, had the awareness that I couldn't say no. It would be spiritual sabotage. And anyway, long story short, not too long after that, I ended up in an unexpected divorce from a very lovely second husband, and came to Australia after the divorce. I was completely untethered to anything, but one thing that happened during that time, and this is getting back to the love, I had gone to workshops, I had studied healing arts, I had gone to amazing teachers with a variety of different experiences, including during those 3 years. And every time I wondered, where's the pure love? Like that monk. The pure love. It wasn't enough for me.
And
so,
Auntie, sorry to interject, is that also hearkening back to your childhood as well, where the pure love was evident?
probably, yes. Yes. Because in my childhood, nothing was commodified. There wasn't a fee for learning. There weren't conditions. There was no hierarchy of this teacher is more valuable than this student. It was never like that as a child. And I'll get to that.
Yeah, do. So back to pure love.
So what happened for me at the end of that, all those years, that, you know, maybe 9 years of learning, from the yoga class to the healing arts. And I finally said, no more workshops, no more teachers. I will only contribute to that which is of truth and love. And what I realized was there was in my giving myself over to the learning in these workshops, it took me away from my inner work a little bit. It was as if I was doing someone else's recipes for work. I don't know how to describe it, Sam. I just knew that it was the monk who had set the standard. It was what I held inside me from childhood that had set the standard, and I wasn't finding it in the world. I wasn't finding it in the business of running a yoga school or healing arts even. And I'm not saying that there weren't people who were in their hearts and doing beautiful work. But for me, there was something that wasn't there. And so I stopped doing those things. And all of that coincided with the divorce and then getting a 1-year visa to come to Australia, which was my destiny to meet Bob. So you asked about the childhood and what was the seed planted inside me that was a factor. It was a factor in preparing me, I think, for my life's work. I came in as a soul into this particular family, into this particular setting, which was at a beautiful setting in nature, with lakes, with orchard, with farms, with a big cedar lodge, arts and crafts building, within the context of a summer camp and a school for children who were called exceptional children. And then I think that evolved into calling them children with special needs. But back in the day, they were described as exceptional children. Exceptional meaning they were unusual, they were unique, they were special. Every child was special. And so my grandmother in 1922 was a teacher, and she had started a school in Brooklyn and turned no child away. And of course, it included all children, all races, all abilities. And then I think there were some anti-Semitic sentiment and racially driven sentiment by her neighbors who didn't want these different colored children coming into their neighborhood. And long story short, she went to court 17 times to try to defend her right to school children. And she ended up borrowing money from a sister and buying this land in the country and starting the school here. And that's where I grew up. So it's really, it's kind of difficult to describe what it was like to live in this setting. But I think that the activities, the energy there, it's very hard to describe the intangible qualities of the spirit of the place. But the motto was where everybody is somebody. And so I grew up not knowing that there was judgment about value according to any quality of being human. I had no idea. I had no idea that the whole world didn't grow up playing in the woods with rocks and trees and water and nature in all its glory. I had no idea. And so that same spirit of Kanyini is what I grew up with. So our little house, for me and my 6 siblings, and later 7, was a converted bathhouse between these two giant buildings that I think they were from the 1700s. They were old, and they were the dormitories and the dining room. And me and my siblings, we participated just like the kids. We ate in the dining room. We participated in all the activities, and every child's needs were met. We weren't treated any differently. So that's what I knew about Kanyini, about caring, about love, about value. And I don't think it was an accident. And without a doubt, that definitely prepared me to be with Bob and in a culture that holds very similar values, if not the same.
If something in this conversation lit you up, there's a signal in that. If you want help tuning your own signal into a clear next move, start with a 3-minute signal check-in at naturalgenius.com.au. And if you want focused support, book a signal lab and we'll work through it together. Now back to the Natural Genius. Auntie, I love with every conversation we have, you fill out more and more of your past and your perspective. Tell me about being with Uncle Bob, and as I was referring to before, the way that he used to sit and have you feel protected and safe. Tell me more about that, because I think that it's an amazing experience to feel really safe around others.
Well, that's a very telling question, Sam.
Mm.
I think feeling safe is a birthright. So my understanding, at least in defined really in Bob's culture, not to, at the risk of oversimplifying, but everyone has the right to belong, strive to belong and to create. And that safety is an integral part of that. And, you know, somehow we're finding ourselves in a world that doesn't always feel safe. And I think if two things create safety, it's love and truth. And those are probably the two things that each of us can do our best to contribute to from self. That is Kanyini. So meeting Bob, you know, how did he make me feel safe? My gosh. The number one thing was, you know, when I met him, it was flabbergasting. I had been told by an astrologer that there was a partner waiting for me, and he was a very, very talented astrologer. He told me things about my life that nobody knew, including very matter-of-factly telling me there was a partner waiting for me. I'd had 2 marriages, 2 very good men, but not meant to endure. And I was not interested in a 3rd marriage. I wasn't looking for a man, but this astrologer said very matter-of-factly to me, oh yeah, there's a partner waiting for you. And sure enough, he told me the timing, and he was spot on. But I had no idea. Absolutely, I did not see it coming. But when Bob met me, he burst into tears. And he said, I've been waiting for you, because the spirits of his mother, his grandmother, and his wife appeared to him. And then he sat me down and he said, there's something very important I have to tell you. Now, baby, I'm from Arnhem Land. I get straight to the point. I don't muck around. Are you married? Now, as a Western-born woman, you can imagine, I'm very inexperienced with men in a way. Even though I'd had 2 marriages, I didn't know the world of courting and dating and things like that. But I thought to myself, well, that really could be a line. But I only perceive truth. And that, remember my vow, I will only contribute to that which is of love and truth. And I remember meeting him, and it was so powerful. And I thought, I only feel truth. Now, I had woken up that morning that I met him, and I had no idea what spirit had in store for me, but I knew something was up because they were so close that I woke up with this feeling like I had champagne in my blood vessels. I was absolutely effervescent. Now, for anybody who does Reiki or runs energy or does any of that work, you can feel electricity. You can feel energy. You can at least train yourself, develop the ability. So here I am, a walking, vibrating something. I was so lit up. And
so ready for Uncle Bob.
It was so hot, Sam, and I'm never hot. I'm always bundled up. And so I knew something big was up. And now at that point in my life, I really trusted the invisible guidance more than anything on earth. You talk about being safe. Wow. They had my back. I had absolutely no fear in my life because of the successive buildup of teaching and of opportunity and of things that they gave me to take care of me and to teach me. They were extraordinary. They were Harry Potter. There were things that I didn't see in myself, but in fact, they happened. And so I trusted spirit more than anything. And yet, wow, meeting Bob in that way. And then, when his girlfriend showed up, I didn't think anything of it because I didn't have any agenda, any illicit agenda, until as soon as she arrived and was introduced, Bob announced that her daughter had gone into premature labor in Melbourne, and I met him in Perth, suburb of Perth, and that she had to leave. She had to get right on a plane. Her daughter was giving birth early. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're not kidding. I called my daughter and I said, you're not going to believe what happened. Because that's when I knew spirit wasn't kidding. A baby brought me to Perth to meet Bob, and another baby cleared the way. And then safety. The role of the man in Bob's culture was to protect and provide for. One thing I can tell you about this incredible man, that he didn't wear orange robes, but my gosh, the humanness that he had to endure and to survive it and to grow in his life into such graciousness and integrity of being human and of being Aboriginal. He walked his Aboriginal name. He might have had it beaten out of him, but he walked it in every step. And that provision of his responsibility to protect and provide for, he lived it. He lived it through his heart, through every action of how he behaved. And the thing that I learned that I will never learn fully because it's too complex. Every single behavior in Aboriginal culture is already given. It's all written in the social laws which come through the Jukurpa, and they're taught through the songs, the dances, the initiations of walking the song lines. They're in the earth. They're not changed. They're not given by humanity. And they certainly don't have an agenda like our laws that can be undermined by money and power. They're just given. So in other words, everyone who grows up within the culture knows exactly right from wrong and chooses right. In the old way, in the traditional way, the way Bob grew up in, you want to choose right because it's such a beautiful way to live. And so he walked his Aboriginal identity, including relationship with me. And including that we had this other gift from the universe of being brought together again, to be together for a time in this life. It'd never have been long enough. But what a gift it was for the time we were given together. So I think you're asking about, you know, an example of how he protected me. I mean, number one, he was always honest. No matter what I asked him, even things that could be incriminating for some modern relationships, he always told the truth. And I valued that so much. That was extraordinary. Things like, you know, when I was first there, he taught me. He taught me, even though it was really women who should have been teaching me. But unfortunately, that was not an option at the time for different reasons. But at any rate, he taught me as much as he could. And one of the things, he had a workshop, a group of people come, and we were sitting out on our veranda at Mutitjulu, where he used to teach. And I went in to get him a cup of tea or something. When I came out, the only chair in the circle was directly across from him. And so I took it. And then I'm getting all these funny looks across the circle. Now, I'm brand new to the culture. I'm new to the marriage. I'm new to the culture. And finally, I don't know if it was during a break or what happened, but he tells me, you cannot sit across from me as my wife. That's the place for the brother. I said, well, where do I sit? He said, you sit beside me. And I said, well, there's a woman there. And he said, well, then you tell her to get up. That's your seat. Now, if that were a community gathering, probably all the women would sit together. Or if it was a contemporary Aboriginal gathering, husbands and wives would sit together, and everybody would know that. No woman would jump in between me and Bob. But you see, the Western European culture didn't know that. And yet, my responsibility is to uphold that law. It's a law. The way. And so the subtlest things, we call them feng shui, some of these things. And what a beautiful system it is. Because these two opposite genders, opposite energy, are complementary. We side by side, always. And that was beautiful.
Side by side. Gosh, Auntie, you must have gone through so many nuances, so many experiences of not necessarily knowing exactly the backdrop, having not been born there.
Yes, and you know, I was very, Bob was my safety because he understood that it wasn't my culture. And so there was one time in particular that I thanked a visitor, an Aboriginal woman, for helping me with something. And I said, it's so good to have a sister come and help me. Because she was about my age. Well, she was very offended and angry. actually. And some of that was related to some other things. But at any rate, it was a strong reaction to the point that I had tears in my eyes, that I had offended her and didn't mean to. So in America, you would call a woman a sister, and that would be a very high compliment, but not in Aboriginal culture. And so I was lamenting that. And Bob and I were heading up the highway, I think, to Alice. And I said, I didn't mean to offend her. I feel so badly. I never would have said it if I'd known. And he said, in my culture, you can't be wrong if you don't know you're wrong. But once you learn, then you become responsible for that knowledge. Don't do it again. The graciousness of his era, he was very traditional in his heart, in his way of being. And the graciousness of that is extraordinary. And so he was very patient with me. He truly was. And but I also put my foot in my mouth quite a bit, unknowingly. And I also realized that, this is not my Indigenous culture. And so there are some things that I have to abide by within my identity, within my culture. Some of that came out when he died, with what was important to me about process. For the most part, I did everything that I could to respect the culture that was now, that I was beholden to, and in some ways part of, in many ways part of. But we have to really be gracious and understanding with each other in the world, because you come from a different family culture, a different country culture in so many ways, and so does this person and this person. Every person comes from their own culture if they're not Aboriginal. And we're looking for common ground with each other. Where is the common ground where we can feel the love and the trust, where we can feel safe? It's a really important thing you brought up, Sam, because that's safe. Every human is looking for that. And we have been so hoodwinked in some of these big things that are going on now that we don't feel safe. We don't trust that someone has our best interest at heart. Because sometimes these, especially big corporates that have an economic agenda, sometimes I'm not sure they do.
And I think sometimes that they're caught in layers of communication. So the essence of whatever's being worked on is not always the truth, or the truth line through initiatives is not always remembered.
That's right. And it's very easy to misunderstand each other. I remember sharing a very meaningful film from Arnhem Land with a group in Italy. And they were really peace-loving group, really loving. And the elder in the film says, this film was about the intervention, which was a very horrifically unfair legislation that was racist legislation against Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory. And this elder from Arnhem Land was saying something to the essence of, I don't want you to just say you're going to stand with me in solidarity. Solidarity is not enough. I want you to feel the pain. And he thumped his heart. And then I want you to come with me and help me fight the system. And they heard the word fight, and they ran the other way. Now, English is not his first language. And he is as eloquent and peace-loving and incredibly wise leader and elder as you could ever hope to imagine. And I watched that reaction, thinking to myself, we need to go beyond words. We need to feel each other's hearts. Can you feel his heart? He's not asking to fight like a war. He's asking to stand up for what's right. And that taught me something really strong. We have to have understanding for each other. And when something doesn't sit well, ask questions, make an inquiry, develop our ability to really feel into another person. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants love and belonging. And we need to create a better world together. We need to get to the rightness. We need to fix these things, like the legislation policies that are not fair and damaging. Because, as Bob says in the Kanyini film, our loss is your loss is our loss, and we need to heal together. This is the law of frequency and resonance. And so we have to really listen to each other with graciousness.
How we become vulnerable when we open our heart.
So a sense of safety in the world, because it's such a big topic right now. Safety comes, it's like a sister to trust. Safety and trust are two sides of the same coin. And there's a lot to, there's a lot of valid reasons why we don't sometimes feel safe. And there are energies in the world and energy in certain humans and systems that don't really have our interest at heart. And so if we are open-hearted and we are trusting ourselves, we can feel quite vulnerable, especially when a betrayal occurs, or betrayal after betrayal after betrayal, because of our open-heartedness and our innocence. That really does happen. And so, how do we proceed? How do we open our heart, and yet at the same time not do so with so much naivete that we open ourselves up to betrayal and wrongdoing? And I think that's a really tricky balance. I think little by little, we have to learn how to do that. And we have to find our people. We have to find the people that we feel safe with. It's like Bob said to my friend Kimberly, when she said to him, "Uncle, how is it that you're just so kind to everyone? Some people aren't very kind back." And he said, "Well, you can be kind, but you don't have to take everybody home with you." And so, I don't know about you, but I have been in situations. I remember going to a satsang. I think that's what you call it, where everybody's chanting at a yoga studio. And I sat down in the front row because the teacher knew me and she brought me to the front row, and the people behind me were not very appreciative that I was sitting in front of them. And immediately when I sat down, I heard in my head, "These are not your people." And the people behind me were so agitated that their agitation was present during the whole event. And when we left and we were walking out to the car, my sister was commenting to me, and she said, "Oh my gosh, what was going on with those people behind me? I heard in my head, 'These are not your people.'" My sister heard exactly what I heard. And so, that was an experience of a lot of beauty, a lot of sharing. It was supposed to be sacred music, and it was, and yet we don't have to take everyone home with us, but we do need to we can afford to be graciously kind because we understand. And that's the thing. We have to develop compassion and understanding, but we also have to be like Bob talks about in his autobiography, Songman. He talks about the capacity to discern danger, just like the spider and a web. The spider is so astute when it comes to vibration. She can tell if something in the web is food, ready to be food, or something dangerous, and they wait. And so developing that discernment is part of, it's just part of the process of refining our abilities, our intuitive abilities. And in the meantime, we have to help each other and have each other's backs and really connect to, to our people at a heart level. I think soul families are coming together now more than anything. And it does sting to be betrayed. It does. But it's also possible to develop an understanding of graciousness for that person who has betrayed us. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote a beautiful thing. I think the book was called Entering the Castle. And she said, in order to access the divine heart, the personal heart has to be shattered. You must be betrayed and then forgive your betrayer. So it's kind of like death. You don't know the true capacity for love until you've experienced loss to that level. And I think betrayal can be that as well. You don't know the true capacity for understanding and forgiveness that you have until you've been betrayed and you've forgiven your betrayer. And I don't know about you, but I had the experience recently of hearing the voice of someone who you could say she betrayed me. That was my experience. And I had sleepless nights for a few years after that. And then, my energies were directed elsewhere in service and in love. And one day I kind of accidentally came upon her voice in a voice memo. And my heart, it was like I felt the friendship. I didn't feel the betrayal. I felt the friendship. I felt my love for her. And I realized that, I don't know what it was, if it was time and distance was a factor, but I think what it really was that I had vested so much in kind, caring care that my heart was beyond whatever it is, the sorrow of betrayal. Didn't touch me anymore. That was hers. She did that. I didn't. And I know the good side of her, the good bits in her. There was a reason that drove her to do what she did. And I just felt love. That's what's there. There's just one more thing that just popped into my head, so I'm just going to blurt it out. I heard clear as a bell from spirit after a betrayal once a long time ago in 2007. Time doesn't heal, truth does. And truth over time rebuilds trust. The response of the person who did what he did, he said, I thought time would heal the wound. Spirit gave me those words, clear as a bell. No, time doesn't heal, truth does. And truth over time rebuilds trust. So part of the truth of the person who's been betrayed is to understand the whole truth, not just the betrayal, but compassion for the person who, took that.
Auntie Barb, I could talk to you about so many different other topics. I want to make mention of you sitting in your beautiful dad's chair, because as the sun is setting over there and the sun has risen over here, I can see the sun coming through it and you're glowing. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
I guess I would only say that, I have one story. Sometimes I look out in the world at individuals and I think, my gosh, I imagine the stories that every individual is living and carrying and creating. And I hope that, through these stories that you are sharing of individuals, if there's one takeaway that wakes something up in the soul of another being, then good for you, Sam.
Oh, Auntie.
Because truly, this podcast, Natural Genius, you could say it's two sides of the same coin of where everybody is somebody. It is. Everybody has natural genius somewhere. And yet, we need others to reflect that back to us. We need to be reminded. Every individual needs to be seen in that way.
Go team.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Auntie.
I love what you're doing.
Thanks for listening to the Natural Genius podcast. Please share this with anyone who came to mind and visit us at naturalgenius.com.au. Thanks so much.